So welcome everybody to this session in our Visualizing Climate Change series on climate migration. I'm very happy to have with us, as always, our fantastic hosts, Maria Teresa Salvati and Federica and Alessio as well. I'd just like to thank the people who are behind all this. Obviously, everything is connected, and Maria Teresa, who's been coordinating and curating this wonderful series of talks, my university, University of Arts London, and of course, Seven Insider. And then a special thanks to Footerwings, the partner of Seven Insider, who helps support these wonderful talks in general. And please do have a look at the Seven website for more talks and more events going on. But without further ado, just to remind you of the format. So the session's about an hour. Maria Teresa will introduce the theme, and then Federica and Alessio will talk about their work in this area. And then if you have questions, you put them into the Q&A box, and I will curate them and pass them through to the speakers. So hopefully there'll be time at the end for some discussion and some conversation as well. And so thank you very much. And without further ado, Maria Teresa, over to you.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome everyone. I'm Maria Teresa Salvati, founder and director of Everything is Connected, which is a transdisciplinary platform aimed at creating a new communication paradigm, hoping to involve a wide and diverse range of people to raise awareness about the environmental crisis. This talk is the fifth of the series called Visualizing the Climate Crisis, and we try to connect visual journalists and documentary photographers with professionals of complete different disciplines, such as science, policy making, education, architecture, social innovation, media, and much more. We've been talking with different people in the past. And we started with a specific topic because we believe that make it tangible and concrete for people it's a lot easier to understand. And for professionals also, to explore the possibility of thinking beyond their own disciplines as a way to expand the reach, involve the large public, moving beyond inspiration and really trying to guide people into taking action and going towards possible and tangible solutions. The previous talks have been about ocean acidification, virtual water, fashion system, deforestation, and today we'll talk, as Paul said, about climate migration. You can find all these videos of the past talks on our website and also on Seven website. Our website is everythingisconnected.eu. Today we have the pleasure to have as guest Alessio Paduano, which is an Italian documentary photographer, and Federica Fragapane, an Italian information designer. We'll talk about climate migration from two different perspectives. One is photography, one is information design, and we'll try to share ideas and perspectives on how climate migration can be visualized, being it a very upheaval phenomenon, and we'll try to see how visual stories and data visualization can eventually work together to tell to the public the whole story. I'll give you a little context in which this talk will happen and some data. One of the definition of climate migration given by the UN is the movement of a person of groups of persons who predominantly for reasons of sudden or progressive change in the environment due to climate change are obliged to leave their habitual place of residence or choose to do so either temporarily or permanently within a state or across the international border. This definition is very important to know that doesn't have any legal value because the condition of climate migrant is not officially recognized yet. Also, the numbers are really incredible. We talk about, according to the Institute for Economics and Peace, over 370 million people worldwide have been forcibly displaced by floods, windstorms, earthquakes, or droughts in 2008. And only in 2022 alone, we talk about 32 million people. Of course, the numbers are increasing, and it's considered that around 1.2 billion people could be displaced by 2050 due to natural disasters. Of course, at the moment, the national and international responses to this challenge is pretty limited, and protection for those affected by the phenomenon is considered pretty inadequate, because obviously no one can require a status as asylum seeker for the reason of climate change. Conscious, obviously, that this is a very complex phenomenon, and actually, I don't think there is much talk around. This is a limited space where we can't really represent the complexity of the phenomenon. So we're here just trying to understand in which ways we can eventually change people's perspective and change the visualization of the topic as a way to involve people and understand, considering it will become a very pressing issue, especially in many countries of the global north, being them the entry point for people coming from the global south. So given this premise, I will start with Alessio. Welcome, Alessio. Could you tell us a little bit about your work, your research as a documentary photographer, and your knowledge over the years in regards to the topic of displaced people and migrations? Tell us also mostly what areas you've covered, and what are some key insights that you feel like you have gained, and as per why people leave their own lands.
Hello, Maria Teresa, hello everybody, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this talk. I started my approach to photojournalism about 13 years ago. In the first time I started working with the local news in my city, Naples. That is a really good gym for photographer because every day something happens. I remember that my first approach to migration was in April 2011, when I was documenting a disembarkation of migrants in my city, in the port of Naples. And in that time, the situation and the approach of institution on migration was really different from today, because maybe institution didn't perceive the migration as a propaganda tool. So for a photographer, it was a little bit easier document a kind of event like a migrant disembarkation. All the photographers were really close to the fact. If I must make a comparison with what happened today, I can say that it's very different because institutions prepare a press area really far from the fact. And the photographers are 10 and 10 of meters away from what's going on. So we must reflect about this. After a first approach as a local photographer, I decided to understand more about migration, and I decided to follow the roots of migrants in Europe. So I traveled a lot in the Balkans. I visited Croatia, France, the Greek island of Kos, Lesbos. I was in Serbia. I also followed the mission of NGO working in the Mediterranean Sea. And I started to understand a lot of stuff about migration. The first thing I learned was during my work is that migrants are not numbers, as television tried to tell us. I think that the second thing I understood was that migrants is not necessarily mean poor people, poor person. In fact, when I was in Croatia, this was during the period of the war in Syria. I met a lot of people coming from that country, and I met a lot of teachers, a lot of professors, engineers, students. I want to share with you some pictures that I made during that period. Okay, so this is a little summary of the work I made in the last 10 years, more or less, about migration. I understand during the work I made in these years, I understood that it's important for a photographer the concept of trust from the people you are going to photograph. You cannot go in a place, take off your camera and start to make picture. You need to talk about people. So another term is that for me is important is the dialogue. You must to speak with the people, and you must try to understand the people. So the concept of trust is really important for making a good picture. If you want that people start to accept your presence and open the door of their life to you. Of course, not the people accept a photographer, because not all the people are the same, and maybe there are people that want more privacy and don't want to show a really difficult moment of their life. So as a photographer, you just must accept what they want. And this was just a little summary of what I did during these years of migration.
Thank you, Alessio. Hi, Federica. Welcome to this talk today. I wanted to ask you if you could tell us about your research and work as an information designer, and could you explain us the process for turning complex data into accessible and really compelling visual stories?
Yeah, so let me share my screen and please see, just let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
So hi, everyone. My name is Federica Fragapane. I'm an information designer, and this is a visual summary of what I do. I visually translate numbers, qualitative or quantitative information into visual elements, into visual representation. And the aim is to help the comprehension of complex issues, or also help people in discovering something new, new topics, new information, new data. And the range of complexity that can characterize my projects can be very broad, and this is depending on the needs they answer to, on the usage context, on the readers they want to talk to. I'm going to talk about migration and about environment later, but I want to show you a couple of examples in general about my work and my process. When I say that the range of complexity and also an experimentation can be broad, I mean that I work on very simple and classical representations, as this one, for instance. I collaborate with the European Union, and for them, I design very classical and minimal representations for data stories that they periodically publish. But I also work with more organic and soft and less classical representation. For instance, this is a visualization about environmental defender deaths in Brazil, and it was designed to accompany an article about environmental defenders' deaths written by Yesenia Funes, a brilliant journalist for the magazine Atmos. So I often describe my job as using visual words, visual elements to talk about topics and to visualize, to give a shape to information and to numbers. And I want to show you the construction of one of my works, just to show you how I start from a table, a data set, as this one, and I use the data to overlay different layers of information, just to show you a practical example, because for me, it's the best way to explain what I do, to explain my work. So this, for instance, these were data about environmental from another perspective, because it was about space junk. So the junk that we are leaving on space. And this was the table I was starting from. In this case, I had it about the different kind of junk, the different kind of debris on space, categorized by their distance from Earth, about how many objects there are at the different distances, what categories they belong to, and how many tons are orbiting Earth. And so to show you how I usually use this information to overlay different layers, in this case, the first information I had was the one about the categories of objects. So you can see satellites, unintentional debris, rocket bodies, and so on. And I grouped the objects by category. And then I had the information about the distance from Earth, the one that you can see on the left. And then I visualize the distance with this length of this bar chart, or this line. I use different visual variables to show different kind of information. In this case, I use the length of a bar chart to represent the distance. And then I had the information about the number of objects orbiting Earth at that indicated distance. And I visualize this information as the area of a circle. So for instance, if you look at the first circle on the bottom left corner, there are more than 2,000 satellites orbiting Earth at a distance of 2,000 kilometers. So this is how I use different visual languages. And then I had another information that was the mass in tons orbiting Earth at the indicated distance. And I visualized it with these different strokes of the lines, indicating different ranges of mass in tons. And finally, I had the data about historical trends. You see those small trend lines that you can see below each category. So this is just to see this project was realized for BBC Science Focus, so for a cultural magazine, a scientific magazine. When I say that it depends also the complexity on the usage context, I mean that designing something for a scientific magazine, for instance, it's a kind of project in which I know that I can work on pieces that need more time to be read, because I also think that there are topics that deserve time to be read in their complexity. Working for a daily newspaper, for instance, would be very different. I knew that I would need to work on something easier and less complex. But this is just to give you a first overview of my process, my work, how I use data and information to convey stories. And I'm going to talk about some of them, about migration and climate too, more in detail later.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Federica. Alessio, back to you. I wanted to know, we said before that the number of the climate refugees are going to increase in the next years, and they talk about 1.2 billion people by 2050. In the areas you mostly covered that you talked about before, I guess most of people were escaping from wars, poverty, or to find a better future. Do you think that the cause for this increase of displacements associated to climate change implies a shift also in the way the stories are told to people? Do you think, in your opinion, the motivation is relevant at all, in your opinion and for the public opinion?
No, I think that the way in which migrations will be told in the future will not change. What change, in my opinion, will be the scenario, especially if you want to talk about migration starting from the country that people want to live. We can think about the last years when photographers went in countries like Libya, Syria, documenting and showing the people escaping from the war. Photographers saw there was in front of urban guerrilla, people dead, armed people, clashes. And it seems that in the next years, this will change. We must think that what will change from a visual point of view, as I was saying, it's the scenario. So the landscape will change, in my opinion. We must think that, according to experts, for example, the sea levels in the next year on the coast of Africa will rise up to 4 millimeters per year. It seems a little number, but it's a very big number. And this will force thousands of people to leave their homes. I worked the last year in December of 2023 in Senegal for the first time working on the migration caused by climate change. My work was focused especially on climate change. I'm going to show some picture of that work. And it was the first time I met people leaving their country for a climate reason. I will open now the folder with the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just let me know if you can see the picture.
Yes, maybe put it full screen.
Yeah, just a second, it's a little bit slow.
Cool.
Okay. And so this work was about climate change on the coast of Senegal, that is destroying, the sea is destroying a lot of houses that are built in front of the sea. This is caused by the growing of the level of the sea. And so the waves are destroying the house in front of the sea. This is a really big problem for the people living in front of the sea. As you can see from this aerial view, the houses are located really far to the water, and in a country like Senegal, where people mostly live of fishing, is a really big problem, because a lot of family are forced to abandon their home and live in migrants camp in the country, and these camps are located really far from the coast. So it's a problem for the fishermen, who every day must pay a taxi, must pay bus, and they make really long journey to reach the working place. So the only difference that I found during this work is just about the scenario. I think that the risks for all these people will be the same. It not depends from the motivation that push them to leave their country. I'm just thinking about a young guy that I met during my journey. His name was Diagamar. And he tried to leave Senegal, paying money to a smuggler, but he was not able to complete his journey, because when the boat start the trip, in the middle of the trip between Morocco and Mauritania, the man who was driving stopped and came back because of the bad weather condition. So he just lose money, and he was not able to reach Barcelona, to reach Spain, sorry. And he wasn't able to complete his dream. A lot of people call this journey Barcelona or death, because the final destination for a lot of them is Barcelona.
Coming from, sorry?
He was coming from Saint Louis, that is a small city of Senegal.
Okay.
And he was trying to reach Spain. So a lot of young people also, if they know the risks connected to this trip, they try more and more to reach Europe. I'm thinking also to another tragedy occurred last February, where at least 26 people died during a shipwreck. The ship was carrying around 300 migrants who were trying to reach Europe. So this is one example of what I was speaking about the scenario. This was an house destroyed by the sea. And this was the guy I was speaking about few minutes ago. And this guy tried one time to reach Europe, and he will try again, even if the risk is very high. These are the houses located in front of the sea, destroyed by the sea. So if I have to say that there is a difference in for a photographer in working about migration. The motivation is not so relevant, in my opinion.
I guess the motivation is it doesn't impact the people that are leaving. I mean, it's not relevant if people needs to leave. Whatever is the motivation is not relevant. But because this wave of people is probably going increase, like in terms of important numbers in the global north. There is a need in a way to prepare people that will need to welcome these people, because these people will need to go somewhere. And actually the reason of the climate change being also, we know that a lot of people from the global north are kind of responsible for climate change. I think the narration needs a little bit of reviewing, to be honest, especially for the Western world. I understand what you mean in terms of the reason why people need to leave. I mean, they need to leave for whatever reasons. But we need to be prepared for these increasing numbers and changing also the perception of what will happen, and feeling directly responsible as well for what's going on.
The communication of the politic is important, because as I said in the beginning, politic try to use the migration tool as propaganda, and all the people, a lot of people think that the migrants are the enemy. It's not like this. They are just persons.
Okay. Thank you. Federica, back to you. You worked in the past at a project called The Stories Behind the Line, How and Why I Designed a Visual Narrative of 6 Asylum Seekers' Routes. What are some of the biggest challenges you have faced in visualizing very personal and intimate stories? And then how you transform them into graphics and visual narratives? How do you ensure that the visualization you bring to life doesn't oversimplify or misrepresent the complexity of the realities you try to display, and in this case with the asylum seekers?
Yeah, let me just quickly explain a few aspects about the project. So now that you know about my job and what I do, I visualize data, visualize information, and I like to use my competencies to talk about topics that are important to me, that matter to me. And so this is why some years ago, actually, it's a relatively old project. I worked on it in 2016. I decided to use my competencies and my language to talk about migration. And I wanted to tell the stories of people. I know that there are a lot of big and complex data to be visualized about migration. I also visualize them too. But in this case, I wanted to talk about the migration topic, giving a voice to the people who live the topic every day. So the asylum seekers, so the migrants who are traveling. And I wanted to, living in Italy, I know how in Italy, there is a lot of discourse about the Mediterranean Sea route, because of course it's extremely dangerous, as we all know. But I wanted to talk about all the story. I wanted to talk about all the kilometers that are before that part. And so this is why I decided to work on this project. And I wanted to tell simple stories, simple single stories, using very simple data that everybody could understood. And so this is why I went to a welcoming center in my hometown. I live in Turin, but I was born in Vercelli, northern Italy. And I met some people who were working there. And I proposed them my idea that was very broad at the beginning, and also weird, I guess, for some people hosted in an asylum seekers, in a welcoming center, using data visualization to share your stories and to share your experiences. But I found six people who I'm very grateful to, who very, very kindly decided to trust me. Again, as Alessio was mentioning, it's a matter of trust too. And they decided to tell me their stories. And these people are MB, SS, MG, AL, SG, and TK. They are 6 asylum seekers who arrived in Italy. They were arrived a couple of months prior in 2016, and they decided to share with me their stories and their experiences. And so I met them doing some interviews in the Welcoming Center they were hosted into. And very simply, with the help of Google Maps, we reconstructed their routes point by point, according to what they were remembering to their memories. And for each point, I had decided that I wanted to ask them always the same questions, very simple questions. How many days they traveled to get there? Which was the transportation, and how many days they stayed there before moving to the following place. And then I also added that I would have noted down every additional comment or note or memory that they would have liked to add to their narrative, to their comments, but only if and when they wanted to, because of course I was aware of how painful and dramatic these experiences were. So being very aware of the fact that the migration topic is a complex one and is lived by people who have so many rich experiences, I try to challenge what are some usual narratives about migration. I think that the migration topic is subject to a spectacularization about the media that undermines a clear and clean approach and a clear narrative. And I also wanted to let people talk, to share their views. And so being aware of the fact that it's a complex topic, I wanted to visualize it in a very simple, clean, yet personal way. So after our meetings, I decided how to visualize their stories. And so I created for each person a unique line, a unique route shaped by their lived experiences. And for each city, each place they've been to, I visualize the number of days spent traveling, the ones I asked them to talk about. So in this case, with very clean and simple visual elements. A blue line represents the days of stay in the city, and the light blue one represents the days spent traveling. And then I visualize the different transportation as different dashed lines. Again, with the aim of providing another angle from which to explore the migration topic. And the final result is a website. This project doesn't have any commission. It's a project I worked on during the weekends and the evenings with a very dear friend and colleague of mine, Alex Piacentini. He's an excellent UX UI visual designer, and he's also a developer. So he very kindly helped me into creating this website. And to describe it very quickly, in the landing page, you can see the 6 lines with the initials of the 6 narrators. And then clicking on them, you can see their story, their page. And each story, it's unique, it's important, and I wanted to create a space for each line. I wanted to give them their space that I think they deserve. So for this reason, the first thing you can see are these very simple black lines on a white space. And then interacting with the website, of course, you can see the days, the number of days spent traveling. You can read them, you can read the transportation. These red dots represent the moment in which they decided to share with me a more detailed fragment from their stories, when they wanted to. And so clicking on them allows to read them. And there are lines that are full of red dots. There are lines that have no red dots at all, but it's because it depends on what they wanted to share with me. And then, of course, it's possible to see the map behind the line. It was very important for me to show, of course, the map, the geography, but I wanted it to be a second moment of discovery, because I really wanted people to discover later how long is this path, how long is this line actually. And as you can see, as the Mediterranean sea route, that of course it's extremely dangerous. Again, it's only a small part of another extremely dangerous experience made of thousands of kilometers and sometimes hundreds of days spent traveling. And from a visual perspective, I show you projects that are very evocative, that have a experimental look and feel, that use organic shapes. In this case, I use very minimal and clean representations. The first reason was it was very essential for me, and it was the importance of reflect also the narrative style of the narrators themselves. They told me about their extremely painful stories in such a calm and quiet way that I wanted to reflect it visually too with my own tools. So it was an attempt to reflect the ways in which they told me about their experiences. And then because I really wanted to provide another way to look at the topic, a clean and graphical way, representation to look at it. And I have to say that something, I was intimidated by the fact that I was portraying such a personal and complex topic in such a graphical way, using this kind of minimal graphics. But I have to say that people, when I shared it online after the publication, understood my approach and the reasons behind that. And I have to say that something that helped me a lot were the beautiful words shared by the narrators during our meetings that I kept, of course, in the website. I always like to read some of them, like a beautiful phrase is the one told by SG, who was 26 years old at the time. He was coming from Pakistan, and that at the end of our meeting told me, "My mind is quiet now. I am quiet because I'm safe, and that's why I love Italy." And other beautiful words are the ones by Eyal. He was 17 years old at the time. He crossed part of the Sahara Desert on feet. And at the end of our meeting, he told me, "You have a beautiful life here because you know that you are safe." So I will always be grateful to them because they decided to trust me and to let me tell their stories. And this is just to tell you about another way in which I think data visualization can be used to talk about migration, can be used not only to talk about big numbers, which I think it's important because it provides context, but also sometimes to give a voice to people who don't have platforms to tell their own stories and experiences.
Very cool. Thank you, Federica. It's very interesting to see another perspective on the same topic. Alessio, back to you. This is kind of related to what we were kind of discussing before. I've been listening a lot to some podcasts in the past weeks about the topic of climate migration, and it's on how to tackle and conceive climate migration. And it's almost like some people, they're starting to discuss about this in terms of being a big and amazing epochal human demographic movement. So we know that the global south is expected to increase in number of populations, and it will be mostly affected by or before the global north, affected by catastrophic climate and environmental events, leading most of their or a lot of their inhabitants to having to leave in order to survive. While there is a global north, which in a way faces the opposite problem. So a very heavy demographic crisis, an increase in the elderly people exceeding the percentage of people working forces, and so putting the pension system at the edge of a collapse. So if in this kind of new kind of vision of the world, if we were to change people's perspective and the perception of the climate migration, and so moving from the fear that all the communication done until now is about fearing of being invaded by people, and moving this to a kind of an idea of hoping and solution, how do you imagine visualizing the topic and making it look almost like a big opportunity for all?
Yes, we have in the global north, as you say, a demographic crisis. These are big issues, all connected. The work, the climate, everything is connected. And on the other side, we have the climate crisis that affect mostly African countries. As I said in the beginning, of this talk, migrants are not the enemy. I believe we should stop thinking about our existence in a selfish way, as inhabitants of the nation we live in, and that's it. We are not just inhabitants of the nation in which we live. We are inhabitants of the world. And the fact that our actions have repercussions on the poorest country is a proof of this. I'm just thinking about the intensive farming, the waste of weather, Africa is the continent that maybe contributes the least to climate crisis, but is the one that is paying the highest price. So returning to the discussion of migration linked to climate change, I don't know if we'll be able to transform this migration into an opportunity. If we continue to think about ourselves as individual, and if we continue to think that people who migrate are different people or with fewer rights than us, we are just lucky because we are born in the so-called right place of the world. We are just lucky because we have a different passport, and this passport allows us to reach every part of the world. If a person from Africa wants to reach another country, as I told before, he must make a really risky journey, and an European man just take his flight and go everywhere. So I think this is the point. We must try to disconnect from the narrative that our politics tell every day to us, and just try to build a different model. And in the world today, there are very little models like this. I just worked in a little country in my region, in Campania, Petruro Irpino, a few years ago.
For those who don't know, is still south of Italy, just on the west coast.
And this story was really nice because in this little village, the local people hosts in their home people coming from different countries, people coming from the world. And I think if we are able to build more and more models like this, it will be nice. Also for a photographer, try to document this kind of connection between people coming from different countries. Today, regardless of the causes that pushes people to leave their country, migration is generally seen as something negative. I think that if this perception will change in the future, as a photojournalist, we will be able to document something different, something different from what we are documenting in the last years.
So I guess you're waiting to see what happens. Yeah, it's a point. It's interesting to see. I mean, you guys as a visual storyteller have a good power to show stories that can really impact on people's perception. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see what will happen, and it's just at the beginning, and there isn't a lot of examples yet. But it's a good thinking, I think, going in the direction of exploring what will happen, but also doing research into what can really be told to people, because I think if the numbers are the ones that we've seen, these numbers will affect all of us. So, you know, embracing the concept in a more positive way will be very important for communication all around, the politicians and those people that work in media and artists, whatever.
It would be an opportunity, of course, but if I have to consider what is happening, what I see every day in television, what I read on the newspaper, it's very difficult to transform all this in an opportunity. I think so.
On this one, I mean, we have to, especially because the world is changing drastically. So we must do at least the effort of trying to change. Of course, change happens from the basis sometimes, and then until it becomes a mass new phenomenon. But I don't know, I'm from the school of hope. So let's see what will happen. Thank you very much. Federica, kind of the same question to you as well. In this context, I envisaged before how data visualization could move people's perception from fear to hope, and how we should tell people that, like quoting an Italian sociologist, Franco Cassano, that says the future is plural or there will be no future. So how can we tell people about this, in your opinion?
So again, I want to show you a practical example, because for me it's the best way just to show projects and to show things we and the people I work with try to do in order to change the narratives and change the perspective. And talking about migration, talking about opportunity, and talk about how important it is for us. We who live in the western part of the world. I want to talk about a project called Key Workers, and it's a project that took life in a very bad moment, because it's something I started working on during the first months of the pandemic. So its story was that I was contacted by Marta Foresti, who at the time worked at ODI. ODI, it's a think tank in London. They talk about migration. They deal with migration and environmental topics. And she and her team, during the first months of the pandemic, had created this tracker, this data set. You can see just a part of it. It was a very long data set in which they were collecting stories of migrants' contribution to the pandemic response, migrants, essential workers, but not only essential workers, their contribution, and how governments were recognizing their contribution and were trying to support in that contribution, because it was essential, and it was very, very clear in the first months of the pandemic. So they were creating this data set. They were just collecting these single stories, and they were categorizing them by macro area, by country, by level, national, local level, by kind of sector, if it was the immigration, healthcare, agriculture sector, and the stories themselves. And then they contacted me because they were periodically updating it and publish it online on the social media, but they wanted to give this data set and these stories a shape. They wanted to bring these stories to life in a more visual way. And so that's why they contacted me. And also to show you quickly how the visual languages, words I use to talk about topics are important. I want to show you a first draft that wasn't accepted, and it's the first one. The idea was to give a shape to these stories. And in this first proposal that ODI liked visually, but not from the concept perspective, in this first proposal, the idea was that you see there are many lines coming from a point in the upper part of the screen. Each line is a single story, and then the lines arrives to the place the story is taking place, the geographical area, the city, or so on. And the problem was with this draft was the fact that here it looks like the stories are coming, these contributions are coming from an abstract point from the sky, an abstract point from the upper part of the screen. But those were contributions from people who are already there, who were living there, who were working in those places for years maybe, whose help and whose work was already essential. And so this is why we decided to change the perspective, to change the draft, to discharge it. And I proposed another one, a very simple, actually, and classical representation, the one of a tree, of something growing. But what was growing wasn't the contribution itself, because the contribution was already there, was our awareness of it in a very, in a moment of crisis for us. And so this is why we created this website, in which I, again, with Alex Piacentini, the sound designer I mentioned before, we visualize these stories using the metaphor of a tree. You can see there are some trees, one for each geographic area. And the branches represent the different categorization that the ODI team had prepared. So they're divided into different levels, into different sectors. But this data visualization didn't have, and each red fruit is a story, is a single story of contribution or of the government recognizing it. Here, the purpose wasn't to providing insights to show, oh, this sector is more filled with contribution. So the purpose was just to create an environment that people could lose themselves into, just reading stories. So the data are organized in a way in which the purpose is just to let people read stories and not necessarily prove a point or of a specific sector or a specific area. So this is why the sectors and the areas are not so readable, because those were not the information we were interested in to conveying. And then interacting with the different trees, you can see the different stories plotted on the map. You can see a first categorization of the different sectors. And then, of course, clicking on a single fruit, clicking on a single dot allows you to read the story of contribution and to access to contextual information, and of course to go then to the source. The source could be a report, a paper, an article, and so on. And so in this project, we really try to use data visualization to give a shape to hidden stories, to bring a life to hidden stories, to bring them to life, to bring a data set that wasn't shared enough to life. And again, this is another way in which I think data visualization can be used. To bring data that are hidden, that are there, but we cannot see them, to give them a life, to give them a shape, and to help people in looking at them. It's one of the ways in which I like to use data visualization, and one of the ways in which I think the narrative about migration can change. With ODI, we worked, I'm research associate at ODI now, and we worked on different projects on migration, also about a project on the perspective about migration, because ODI team and also we think that it's a matter of angles, of perspective, and of also visual and not only visual words we use to talk about the topic, and the angles that we decide to explore and to let people explore.
Fascinating, thank you. Alessio, regardless of your experience and the job you do you think photographer is enough to tell the complexity of the migration and the climate migration topic? And if you could choose a new way to tell stories that can really impact on people's perception, what would be, do you think, the message, the visual, the context, the channel that we need to use in order to, or you know, if you have any thinking about it, but have you thought about it?
Yes, of course, the photography is an important tool to speak about migration, but I think it's not enough. It's also important, if you are speaking about a magazine, the text, the journalistic part of the story. I also think that we must start to change our way to speak about some story, not just migration, but in general. I think it's important to focus also on other tool. I'm thinking about video. Video is very important for showing some stuff. During my last work on climate change in Senegal, I realized some small video. I'm approaching to this way of communication because I think in some part of the work it could work better than photography. But I also think that it's important the use of a social network. The data show us that the number of newspapers that people buy are always smaller. And on the other side, a lot of people, especially young people, is always connected every day on the social channel, social network like Instagram, Facebook. So I think we must rethink about our way of communication and invest more in this channel. Because in this way we can reach a larger number of people using, as I said, Instagram, Facebook, and we can reach them in a faster way, because we know every young people don't like to spend more time to read the newspaper. I'm not saying that we must make a how can I say, a not in-depth information, but maybe it could be a starting point, trying to involve young people to some important issues like migration, wars, and climate change.
Cool, thank you. Last question to Federica. You worked in the past with Luca Locatelli on the theme of sustainability. Could you share some, even this is not completely related to climate migrations, but I'm really interested in understanding how did you work with the medium of photography, and if you could share your experience in terms of how, if you had a perception of a tangible positive impact of this project that had on people in terms of like pulling together these two different channels and medium.
Yeah, so I work with Locatelli, photographer Luca Locatelli, for his exhibition, The Circle, that it's all about circular economy solutions and environment. And it was created by Elisa Mette, the brilliant Elisa Mette. And it was a very informative exhibition. All the photographs were about circularity, circular economy solutions, and the descriptions, the captions were very important for them. But they wanted to add an even more informative layer to the exhibition, and this is why they commissioned a set of data visualizations, an interactive one, and some static prints to accompany the exhibition path. And this was super interesting for me because I'd never designed something for an exhibition. I'd never designed something for a photographical exhibition. And so see our different languages combined was extremely interesting for them. I think Locatelli and I share the same strategy, that is to create images that can catch the eye, that can be attractive for the eye in order to convey stories. His approach, he talked about it, and it's mine too. And so it was very interesting to see how we did it together for the same reason, but with different languages. And it was just to show you very quickly, one visualization that is the one I'm most fond of throughout the exhibition. It's a visualization about the project Drawdown. That is a beautiful project by a set of some scientists who are listing all the possible solutions to climate change. This is the visualization that closes the exhibition. And the solutions are such as this one, change in the diet, for instance. And there are tons of solutions. There are more than 90 possible solutions. Some are at the individual level, some are at industrial level, some are more systemic, some can be solution you can work on personally. And there are a lot of solutions. You see in the visualization, one single branch is a possible solution, and I wanted to visualize all of them. This is the most complex visualization throughout all the exhibition, but I really wanted to show how rich the range of possible solutions is. The solutions are categorized by categories such as agriculture, diet, electricity, and so on. And then there is the visualization about how they could help in reducing greenhouse gases. And so this was, as I was mentioning, this was a very complex visualization. It was the last one. So visitors were kind of used to the data visualization language throughout the visitor's path, throughout the exhibition path. But I was very glad to use these my tools to talk about this project and all the other data, and to insert them in a photographical exhibition, because in terms of impact, I knew, and then it was happened, the exhibition was very widely visited, a lot by students, very young students from high school, but also elementary schools. Something that I really loved was the fact that some teachers from an elementary school asked then to the organizers the posters, the digital version of the posters, so that they could give them to the students and they could study them in class or at home. And this is a way for me, it's a very nice way to integrate another visual language and to integrate data that can be intimidating as a tool to study phenomena in an artistic context, and then to see that this artistic context is brought in other important contexts, such as the schools, for instance, the education one.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alessio and Federica, sorry. Paul, do you want to, I see there are some questions from the public.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of questions about conflict, which I think we've already dealt with, around, migration is, what are the drivers of migration. There was a question from Jergli about where do we look for the solutions to this problem? Is it in terms of what we do when migrants come to Europe or to America, or should we be taking a bigger responsibility for helping them in their own countries to build a better future there? Because a lot of the reasons that climate the climate emergence is happening is because of our activity in the West, but the impact is being felt in those countries. So the specific question, I think, to Alessio was what you know, when you've worked in countries that people are coming from, what is their sense of our responsibility towards them in terms of making their lives in their own countries better or not?
I think as European, the responsibility, it depends from all the nation, because every time we think about a solution, I come from Italy, so every summer, because the summer is the period where a lot of migrants come by sea in Italy, because Italy is the first stop before reaching Europe, Northern Europe. It seems that the problem is just of Italy, and it's not like this. And when a lot of migrants arrive, what I see is that all the other nations don't care about it, and they just turn their face on the other side, because the problem they think is Italian. This is the same thing happened when a lot of migrants came from Syria during the war, and all the migrants arrived in Greece, and also in that moment, that period, all the other nations turned their face. So I think if we will continue to consider migration a problem or just of the nation where the migrants arrive, we will never find a solution.
Yeah, if I can add something, I think there is also here, again, a problem of communication, because Alessio, what you said is correct, but there is also a problem of numbers wrongly communicated, because as we know, Italy is a passage country. So the people that really stay here or they come here to stay here are really relevant in terms of the percentage of migrants that actually increase the number of in Italy, and especially in the south of Italy. So it's really an issue of communicating the problem of the migration. So it's not clearly, if you are an entry point like Italy, you will have more people arriving, but in terms of staying, it's another story. And in terms of staying as well, as we were saying before, because actually in the future we will probably need more working forces, because there is like the natality is really it's close to zero at the moment in Italy. So maybe we need to review the thing, even in Syria, what you were mentioning before, like years ago, Germany, I hate the word imported, but they used the word in the media as well. They imported 500,000 Syrians because they knew they needed for paying the pensions of the Germans. So the thing is starting to change, and I'm not necessarily of the opinion that is going to be an easy change, but it would be so big in terms of numbers that something will have to happen. And so those people that are up like in the front line for telling stories, I think we need to work together on changing the narrative as a way to also involve people into understanding, you know, the complexity of the situation, but also the opportunity.
Very good. Well, I think that's, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just saying that someone is asking the links, so probably they were
Yes.
referring to Federica's links. Yeah. Shared. If you can share in the
Chat box, I guess.
In the chat box, yeah, so everyone
Yeah.
can see them. Thank
Sure.
you.
Are we doing that? Yeah, but I think that's a very good point to end on, that the complexity of communicating this is really important. And I think both of you are doing, or all three of you, in fact, are doing fantastic work in that sense of finding new ways to communicate, and more, perhaps more effective one, and certainly more convincing ones. So thank you very, very much for that. Do we get the links? People want to quickly copy those?
Yeah, Federica shared the links.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's to everyone, so I think everybody can see them.
Okay, great. I'll give people a minute or so to copy those that need them. And well, thank you very much. I don't know if you each want to make a very short closing statement, and then we'll wrap up. So perhaps Federica and then Alessio, and then I'll leave the final comment to you, Maria Teresa, and then we'll finish.
Do you guys want to?
Yeah, I agree that I mean, reality is reality, but how we portray it, how the words we use to narrate it, the images we use, the visual representations we use are essentials. And so it's always a matter of choosing which words, with images, with visual words you want to use to portray it. So I think that it's a huge responsibility that we have on that matters.
Thank you. Alessio?
Me as a photographer, I think the only thing that me and all my colleagues can do in the future is just continue to document what's going on in the world and try to explain why people migrate, and so people maybe can better understand what's happening in the world.
Thank you. Well, the only thing I feel like saying is that because we keep talking about the complexity of everything that is related to climate crisis, the only response for the future is really working together, is really to think in terms of transdisciplinarity. There is no time anymore where anyone can think and talk and communicate just simply by even knowing perfectly their own discipline. We need to work together and invent new models, because the complexity of the phenomena that are coming are not, they're too big for one single discipline to be sorted or communicated. So it's really important to really join forces, even just today. I mean, it's incredible how a visual representation, or like images and the data visualization, how powerful can be the union of these two thinking process, and the bringing back to the community, because in the end you have a lot of different publics, and someone could be more appealed by a language, someone from someone else. So even just in terms of like a summing, the eyes of people can really enrich the target audience and the way things are portrayed, or the way people can absorb and learn and understanding about things. And actually, because Federica talks a lot about solutions, which I think is the way we need to communicate about climate change, is like even understanding what are the solutions I can really rely on in order to see a change. And this needs to be done on a different level with different languages and really inventing new models.
Great. Well, thank you all three of you for this wonderful conversation today. This particular series of talks will be taking a short break for the summer. We'll be back hopefully in September with more in this theme. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much to the audience for attending and participating so well too. And have a good summer, everybody, I guess. So thank you very much, and round of applause.
Thank you very much, Alessio.
Thank you
for joining us today.
Absolutely.
For your very insightful presentations. So see you everyone in September. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay,
And
but I'm going to end the session
everyone.
now. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.